Hello, my name's Robert and I want to continue from where I left off last week with Matthew's account of what happened after the birth of Jesus. Matthew's account is very different from Luke's. Jesus is born under Herod the First, 10 years before the census of Quirinius, where Luke sets it, and there's no mention of Nazareth or of Galilee. The couple are living in Bethlehem when Mary has the baby. In the time of King Herod, this is chapter 2 verse 1. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came. I hate the very thin paper Bibles are made of. Wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child that's born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at his rising, and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learnt from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they'd heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of him went the star that they'd seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh, and having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. Now after they'd left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and remain there till I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I've called my son." When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under, according to the time that he'd learnt from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they're no more. When Herod died, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who were seeking the child's life are dead." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in the place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. After being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He'll be called a Nazarene. So that's rather a long account of Herod acting like any ruler of the time would act. In modern terms, the nearest equivalent is a dictatorship. These guys are authoritarians, and they act like it. Herod, in particular, seems to have been rather paranoid, shall we say. He was a very successful ruler, but at the same time, he wasn't somebody you wanted to be close to. He had his first wife, and 2 sons he had with her murdered, which apparently prompted Augustus to say that it was safer to be Herod's pig than his son. And it seems, according to Josephus, an early Jewish historian, that when he was dying, he had the families of notables imprisoned in the Forum so that they could be massacred as soon as he was dead, because he was determined that people should mourn his passing. They didn't, of course. There were uprisings all over the place once he was safely dead. So that's Herod. Somebody you might compare to, say, Stalin or Franco, a successful long-term ruler, but murderous with it. And so these wise men come from the east. Matthew gives us no clue where exactly they come from. They're Magi. They're obviously educated men. They study the stars. And they've seen this mysterious star, and they want to know what it's all about. So they come looking. They believe it announces the birth of a king. So they turn up at Herod's palace wondering where the child is. Stars don't normally stand in one place, do they? This particular one has its roots in the book of Numbers. In Numbers 24, the story of Balaam. He's the jobbing prophet who's employed by Balak to curse Israel. And in the end, God forces him to bless Israel instead. And in Numbers 24, beginning at verse 15, he says, "So he uttered this oracle, saying, The oracle of Balaam, son of Beor, the oracle of the man whose eye is clear, the oracle of one who hears the words of God and knows the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the vision of the Almighty, who falls down but with his eyes uncovered. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a sceptre shall rise out of Israel. It shall crush the borderlands of Moab and the territory of all the Shethites. Edom will become a possession, Seir a possession of its enemies, while Israel does valiantly. One out of Jacob shall rule and destroy the survivors of Ar." Pretty gory stuff. But at the time, during the New Testament period, this was taken as being a messianic prophecy. So we have to have a star. Matthew is a Jewish writer, writing for a Jewish audience. He is very, very keen to find Old Testament prophecies fulfilled in Jesus. That's a theme throughout his book. And so we have a star. The rather strange expression, "the star stood over Bethlehem," isn't unique. It's paralleled in Josephus, the Jewish historian I mentioned, writing towards the end of the 1st century, around the same time as Matthew was writing. He records the first revolt against Roman rule. And one of the omens before the war actually broke out was apparently a star shaped like a sword, which turns out to be Halley's Comet, standing over the city, Jerusalem. So what was going on there, I wonder? Was there a saying, when you see the star standing over the city, you'll know the time has come? There's something which causes them both to use the same phrase about this miraculous star, this omen of coming events. But of course they interpret it completely differently. To Josephus, it was an omen of war. To Matthew, it was coming, it was announcing the coming of a Messiah who would gain his position by dying and being resurrected. So, did Matthew perhaps borrow the war star and transfer the image to Bethlehem under Herod? We don't know. We've got no way of knowing. But it's an interesting parallel. So the wise men go to Bethlehem, where the star is conveniently standing over the exact house. I wonder how they could tell. And they meet Joseph and Mary and the baby and present them with royal gifts, which Matthew has borrowed from Isaiah. And they're warned in a dream. Well, I should think they would be. Herod, as I say, acts like any ruler of the time. They must have known what would follow if he could find the baby, because obviously they discovered that he didn't know anything about it. And so they're warned in a dream and they take another road home. The important thing here, I think, is that the Magi are foreigners. They're Gentiles. The first people to recognise Jesus as a king aren't Jews. The Jewish experts all know where the Messiah is going to be born, but they don't go check, do they? It's just these Gentiles, these foreigners. And indeed, throughout Matthew's Gospel, the only people who ever call Jesus Son of God are Gentiles. No Jew is ever shown to recognise him for what he was in the entire book. Matthew, as I say, is a Jew writing for Jews, but at the same time he's keen to incorporate Gentiles in his message. From Paul onwards, all the New Testament writers agree that the kingdom of God isn't just for Jews, it's for Gentiles as well. It would be difficult, in fact, for them to exclude them, because there are loads of righteous Gentiles in the Old Testament. Matthew's genealogy of Jesus has several of them. Unrighteous, dodgy, sexually deviant women who feature in Jesus' family tree. People who either turn out to be righteous in the end, like Rahab the prostitute, or Tamar, the woman who has to seduce her father-in-law in order to get the baby that his sons ought to have given her, and one Bathsheba, who's probably an Israelite and isn't exactly righteous, but gets a pass anyway because she's Solomon's mother. And Mary, the woman who awkwardly gets pregnant and almost gets divorced. But then the Magi go home by another route, and Joseph gets warned. There's lots of angels appearing in dreams in this story. He gets warned, run away quick, because Herod is coming. So he goes off to Egypt, and sure enough, the babies get murdered. It says under 2 years old. I have read that with Jewish inclusive reckoning, they'd have recounted as 2 the day after their first birthday, but regardless of that, evidently time, we don't know how much has passed since the baby's been born. He's not a newborn anymore, months I suppose at least, and Herod wants to make absolutely sure he gets this baby. But meanwhile they've run away to Egypt. It's a story which hangs together very, very well against the background of the time, which Matthew seems to know rather well, better than Luke, in fact. He also tells a very good story, but it's one which doesn't hang together when you look closely. Matthew's does. They run away to Egypt, and apparently the main reason for that is so that Matthew can quote from Hosea 11:1, "Out of Egypt I've called my son." It's originally about God's bad son, God's unfaithful son, the people of Israel who were always going off and worshipping other gods, of course, about calling them back from Egypt, back to Canaan in the Exodus. And Matthew takes it and applies it, of course, to God's good son, Jesus. And so they return, and they promptly find that while Herod's dead, his son Archelaus has taken over. And Archelaus was a lot worse than his father. The Jews complained repeatedly. He was brutal, but he didn't have his father's nous. Probably didn't have his intelligence. And after a decade, the Romans, of course, lost patience, kicked him out of office, sent him into exile, and imposed direct rule, which provides the census, which is the background to Luke's story of Jesus' birth. Meanwhile, Joseph and Mary, of course, have gone off to Galilee, a long way away, under another of Herod's sons, Antipas, who was a much more successful ruler and doesn't seem to have oppressed his people any more than any other king of the period. So they're living. So after that, they settle in Nazareth, and they just live quietly there. And when I come back to this, probably next week, I'll continue with Luke's stories about Jesus' childhood. Bye.